3 years ago, my daughter said she needed space for her dog, cut ties with me, and kicked me out of the house with only $10. Then I won $79 million in the lottery, and she called me, "Dad, I miss you. Can I live with you?" Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Benjamin, and 3 years ago my own daughter threw me out like garbage. Not because I was a burden, not because I was sick or difficult. She threw me out because her dog needed more space. I still remember that Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking my coffee and reading the newspaper like I had every morning for the past 15 years in that house. The house where I raised Rachel alone after her mother died, where I watched her take her first steps, where I helped her with homework every night, where I celebrated every birthday and milestone. Rachel walked into the kitchen with that look on her face. You know the one, when someone has already made a decision and they're just going through the motions of telling you. Her boyfriend Derek was behind her, holding their new German Shepherd, Max. The dog was barely 6 months old, bouncing around like puppies do. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, not even looking at me directly. She was 28 years old then, working as a marketing coordinator, making decent money. I had helped her get that job through a connection from my old workplace. I set down my coffee cup. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" The word sweetheart seemed to irritate her. She exchanged a glance with Derek, who nodded like he was giving her permission to continue. That should have been my first warning sign. "Derek and I have been talking, and we think it's time for some changes around here." She gestured around the kitchen, my kitchen, where I had made her breakfast every day before school for 12 years. "Max is growing fast, and he needs more space to run around. The house isn't big enough for all of us." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What are you saying, Rachel?" Derek stepped forward then, his arm sliding around my daughter's waist in a gesture that felt more possessive than loving. "What Rachel is trying to say, Ben, is that maybe it's time you found your own place. You know, independence and all that. Independence. At 60 years old, after spending my entire adult life working 2 jobs to support Rachel, after giving up dating, remarrying, traveling, everything that might have brought me joy, so I could focus entirely on raising her. Rachel," I said slowly, "this is my home. We've lived here together since your mother died. I paused, trying to find the right words. "I thought we were family." She finally looked at me then, and what I saw in her eyes broke something inside me that I don't think ever healed. There was no warmth, no recognition of everything I had sacrificed. There was just impatience, like I was a problem she needed to solve. "Dad, you have to understand. Derek and I are planning our future together. We want to get married next year, maybe start a family. And Max," she looked down at the dog with more tenderness than she had shown me in months, "he's like our practice baby. He needs room to grow." "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside, I felt like I was drowning. Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a screen. "We found some nice senior living communities, very affordable. Some of them even have activities and meal plans. Senior living. They wanted to put me in a nursing home so their dog could have my bedroom." "I'm not moving to a nursing home," I said firmly. "I'm 60, not 90, and this is my house too." That's when Rachel's mask slipped completely. Her voice turned sharp, cold. "Actually, Dad, it's not. The house is in my name, remember? You put it in my name when I turned 25 for tax purposes." She was right. My lawyer had suggested it, and I had trusted her completely. I had signed over my home to my daughter because I believed she would always take care of me like I had taken care of her. "Rachel, please," I said. And I hate that my voice cracked. "I raised you in this house. I worked double shifts at the factory so you could have everything you needed. I never remarried, never had another life because you were my world. Doesn't that mean anything?" For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret maybe, or guilt. But Derek squeezed her hand, and whatever softness might have been there vanished. "Dad, I need you to pack your things. Derek's helping me paint your room this weekend for Max. He's been sleeping in our room, and it's not working anymore." The room where I had slept for 15 years was being turned into a dog's bedroom. The room where I had lain awake countless nights when she was a teenager, worrying about her safety when she was out late. The room where I had cried alone after her mother's funeral, because I didn't want Rachel to see me fall apart. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. When? This weekend would be best, Derek answered for her. We already bought the paint. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had shaped and loved and sacrificed everything for. Rachel, if I leave this house, if you make me leave, there's no coming back from this. You understand that, right? She crossed her arms. Dad, stop being so dramatic. It's not like you're going to be homeless. You can find a nice apartment, maybe even meet someone your own age. This could be good for you. That afternoon, I packed 28 years of my life into 3 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes. Rachel watched from the doorway as I gathered my clothes, my books, the few pictures I had of her mother. She didn't offer to help. She didn't ask if I needed anything. As I carried the last box to my old Honda, Derek came out with an envelope. Rachel wanted me to give you this, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Inside the envelope were 10 $1 bills and a note in Rachel's handwriting for gas money. Take care of yourself. $10. After everything I had given her, after every sacrifice I had made, she gave me $10 like I was some stranger she felt sorry for. I drove away from that house, from the life I had built, from the daughter I had loved more than my own life, with $10 in my pocket and nowhere to go. In my rearview mirror, I could see Derek already measuring my bedroom window, probably planning where to put the dog's bed. The last thing I heard as I drove away was Max barking excitedly in what used to be my backyard. I had no idea that 3 years later, that same daughter would be calling me, voice sweet as honey, asking if she could come home. Those first months after Rachel threw me out were the darkest of my life. With $10 in my pocket and no plan, I drove around for hours that first night, trying to figure out where someone like me could go. Hotels were out of the question. Even the cheapest motel would eat through my savings in a week. I had about $800 in my checking account, the remainder of that month's Social Security check after I had paid for Rachel's car insurance and helped with her grocery bill. I ended up at a truck stop outside the city, sleeping in my Honda in the parking lot. The security guard knocked on my window around 3 a.m., flashlight glaring through the glass. When I explained my situation, he took pity on me and let me stay until morning, but he made it clear I couldn't make it a habit. The next day, I started looking for a room to rent. What I found with my limited budget was a basement room in a house owned by a woman named Mrs. Chen. $40 a week, no kitchen privileges, shared bathroom with 3 other tenants. The room was barely bigger than a closet, with one small window that looked out at the foundation of the house next door. The walls were concrete block, painted a sickly green color that reminded me of hospital rooms. Mrs. Chen was not a cruel woman, but she wasn't warm either. She explained the rules in broken English. No noise after 10 p.m., no guests, rent paid every Sunday morning, no exceptions. The other tenants were men like me, forgotten by their families or society, each carrying their own story of loss and disappointment. I had to find work immediately. At 60, my options were limited. The factory where I had worked for 30 years had closed down 5 years earlier, and most places weren't interested in hiring someone my age. I finally found a job as a night security guard at a warehouse. $8 an hour, 6 nights a week. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay Mrs. Chen and buy basic groceries. The work was lonely. I sat in a small booth at the warehouse entrance from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., watching empty hallways through security monitors. The isolation gave me too much time to think, to replay that last conversation with Rachel over and over. I kept wondering what I had done wrong, how I had failed as a father. During those long nights, I would sometimes call Rachel's number just to hear her voice on the voicemail. I never left messages. What would I say? But hearing her voice, even the recorded version, felt like a connection to the life I had lost. For the first month, her voicemail was still the same cheerful message. "Hi, you've reached Rachel. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you." Then one night in April, I called and heard a different message. Her voice was colder, more businesslike. "You've reached Rachel Hendricks. Please leave a detailed message." Hendricks. She had taken Derek's name, even though they weren't married yet. She was erasing every trace of me from her life, even our shared last name. I tried texting her a few times. Simple messages. Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you. Miss you, sweetheart. The messages showed as delivered, but never as read. Eventually, I realized she had blocked my number. One evening in May, about 2 months after she kicked me out, I was walking past a coffee shop near the warehouse when I saw her through the window. She was sitting with Derek and another couple, laughing at something on Derek's phone. She looked happy, radiant even. Her hair was styled differently, more expensive looking, and she was wearing a dress I didn't recognize. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just watching her. She seemed so carefree, so unburdened. There was no sign that she missed me or regretted her decision. She looked like someone who had solved a problem and moved on with her life. As I turned to walk away, Derek looked up and saw me. He said something to Rachel, and she turned toward the window. Our eyes met for just a moment through the glass. I raised my hand slightly, a small wave, hoping for some sign of recognition, of regret, of love. She turned away without acknowledging me and said something to Derek that made him laugh. That night, I sat in my security booth and wrote her a letter on the back of some warehouse paperwork. I told her how much I missed her, how sorry I was for whatever I had done wrong, how I would do anything to be part of her life again. I told her about my job, about the basement room, about how empty my days felt without her. I poured my heart onto that paper in my shaky handwriting. I never sent it. What was the point? She had made her choice clear. In June, I learned from a neighbor who still had my old address that Rachel had sold the house. The same house where I had changed her diapers, taught her to ride a bike, helped her with algebra homework. She sold it for a considerable profit and moved with Derek to a new apartment across town. The money from the sale, money that represented 30 years of my mortgage payments, went entirely to them. That's when I realized that my daughter hadn't just thrown me out for her dog's comfort. She had planned this. The house transfer, the emotional distance in the months before she kicked me out, the quick sale. It had all been calculated. She had wanted me gone so she could cash in on the life I had built for her. The basement room felt even smaller after that realization. Some nights I would lie on the thin mattress and listen to the other tenants through the paper-thin walls. Jimmy, the man in the room next to mine, talked in his sleep about his ex-wife, who had taken everything in their divorce. Carlos, across the hall, cried quietly some nights about the children who never called. We were all forgotten men, discarded by people who had once claimed to love us. But the hardest part wasn't the loneliness or the cramped living conditions or even the humiliation of working security at my age. The hardest part was the hope that wouldn't die. Every time my phone rang, every time I heard footsteps on the stairs above my room, every time I saw a car that looked like Rachel's, my heart would jump. Some pathetic part of me kept believing that she would realize her mistake, that she would come looking for me, that she would apologize and ask me to come home. She never did. As winter approached, I realized I needed to accept reality. My daughter was gone. The life I had known was over. I was a 60-year-old man living in a basement, working nights for minimum wage, with no family and no future to look forward to. I had hit rock bottom, but somehow, I kept getting up each morning and going through the motions of living. What choice did I have? I had no idea that in just a few months, everything would change in a way I could never have imagined. By October, I had settled into a routine that I wouldn't call living, but rather surviving. Wake up at 4 p.m., shower in the communal bathroom while hoping it was clean, eat a simple dinner of whatever I could afford, then head to work at the warehouse. 6 nights a week, watching empty hallways and filling out incident reports that usually just said, "No incidents to report." The job paid enough to cover Mrs. Chen's rent and basic groceries, but there was never anything left over. I hadn't bought new clothes since moving into the basement room, and my shoes had holes that I covered with duct tape. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better, but honestly, I couldn't see how. It was a Wednesday night in late October when my life changed forever, though I didn't know it at the time. I had stopped at a gas station on my way to work using my debit card to put exactly $12 of gas in my Honda, enough to last me through the weekend. As I was leaving, I saw the electronic lottery sign flashing Mega Millions, $79 million. I'm not a gambling man, never had been. Even when Rachel's mother was alive and we had disposable income, I never bought lottery tickets or visited casinos. But that night, standing in that gas station with my patched shoes and my third-hand work uniform, something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the cashier, a young kid about Rachel's age, looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. Maybe it was the realization that this was probably going to be my life for the next 10 or 15 years until my body gave out completely. Or maybe it was just the desperate hope that somehow, some way, things could be different. I walked back to the counter and pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills from my pocket, money I had planned to use for coffee during my shift. "1 Mega Millions ticket," I said. The kid handed me the ticket without even looking up from his phone. I stuffed it into my wallet and forgot about it almost immediately. $2 wasn't going to change my life, but at least for a few seconds I had allowed myself to imagine that it might. The drawing was on Friday night, but I was working and didn't watch it. Saturday night, same thing. By Sunday, I had completely forgotten about the ticket. It sat in my wallet behind my driver's license, just another piece of paper in a life full of meaningless paperwork. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning out my wallet because it was getting too thick with old receipts and business cards from places I'd applied for better jobs. That's when I found the lottery ticket, wrinkled and forgotten. The numbers on it meant nothing to me. 17, 23, 32, 38, 42, with a mega ball of 15. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something made me think I should check it, just to be sure. Not because I thought I had won anything, but because I'm the kind of person who checks these things. It's the same reason I always double-check my bank statements and read the fine print on everything. I went to the gas station where I bought it, planning to scan it at the lottery machine and throw it away when it confirmed what I already knew, that I had won nothing. The machine was out of order, so I handed the ticket to the same kid who had sold it to me. He scanned it, and I watched his face change. First confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking, "I think you need to sit down." "What's wrong?" I asked. "Did the machine break?" He scanned it again, and the same expression crossed his face. "Sir, this ticket is worth $79 million. I stared at him. "What? You won the Mega Millions. $79 million. The words didn't make sense. I took the ticket back and looked at it again, comparing the numbers to the winning numbers posted on the wall. 17, 23, 32, 38, 42. Mega Ball 15. They matched perfectly. I sat down on the curb outside the gas station and stared at that piece of paper for I don't know how long. Cars drove by, people walked past. Life continued normally around me while my entire world shifted on its axis. $79 million. After taxes, it would be about $45 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. More money than I had ever dreamed of having. My first thought wasn't about what I would buy or where I would live. It was about Rachel. I could help her now, really help her. I could buy her a house, pay off any debts she might have, make sure she never had to worry about money again. Maybe this windfall could bring us back together. Maybe now she would see that I was worth having in her life. But then I remembered the way she had looked at me through that coffee shop window, the coldness in her eyes when she kicked me out. The $10 she had given me for gas money, like I was a stranger, she pitied. I sat on that curb for 2 hours, holding the winning ticket and thinking about everything that had happened in the past 7 months. By the time I finally stood up and drove home to my basement room, I had made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to tell Rachel. Not yet. The lottery commission required winners to come forward within a certain time frame, so I couldn't wait too long. But I wanted time to think, to plan, to decide what kind of man I wanted to be with this new fortune. That night, lying on my thin mattress in Mrs. Chen's basement, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had happened. 3 weeks ago, I had been a forgotten man living in poverty, discarded by his own daughter. Now I was worth $45 million, and the daughter who had thrown me out for her dog didn't even know it. I thought about all the things I could do with the money. I could buy a mansion, travel the world, never work another day in my life. I could start a foundation, help other people in situations like mine. I could live like a king. But mostly, I thought about Rachel. Would she want me back now? Would she suddenly remember that she loved me once the money was involved? And if she did, what would that say about the kind of person she had become? The winning ticket sat on the small table next to my bed, a piece of paper that represented more than just money. It represented power, options, the ability to choose my own future for the first time in 7 months. I had been powerless when Rachel kicked me out. I had been at her mercy, dependent on her goodwill and generosity. She had held all the cards, and she had played them to push me out of her life completely. Now the tables had turned in a way that neither of us could have predicted. I was no longer the desperate father begging for scraps of affection from his ungrateful daughter. I was a man with options, with the freedom to decide who deserved to be part of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel had kicked me out because she saw me as a burden, someone who took up space and resources she wanted for herself and Derek. Now I had more resources than she could imagine, and she had no idea. I decided to wait. I would claim the money, start my new life, and see what happened. If Rachel ever reached out to me genuinely, out of love and not need, then maybe we could rebuild our relationship. But if she only came back because of the money, well, that would tell me everything I needed to know about the daughter I had raised. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized something had changed inside me. For the first time since Rachel threw me out, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I might gain. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the Lottery Commission office to claim my prize. The Lottery Commission required me to do a press conference, but I managed to keep it small and brief. I wore my best shirt, the same one I had worn to Rachel's high school graduation, and answered their questions with simple, honest responses. Yes, I was shocked. No, I hadn't expected to win. Yes, I planned to be responsible with the money. What I didn't tell them was that I was starting over completely, building a new life from scratch at 61 years old. After taxes and fees, I walked away with $43 million. The first thing I did was give Mrs. Chen $1,000 and tell her I was moving out. She looked at the money suspiciously, probably thinking I had robbed a bank or gotten involved in something illegal. I didn't explain. I just packed my 3 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes and drove away from that basement room forever. I could have bought a mansion. I could have purchased the most expensive house in the city and filled it with luxury cars and designer furniture. But I didn't want that. I wanted something different, something real. Instead, I bought a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood about 40 minutes from where Rachel lived. It wasn't fancy, but it had a small garden, a front porch with a swing, and windows that actually let in sunlight. After months in that dim basement, the brightness felt like a miracle. The house cost me $180,000, a fraction of what I could afford. But it felt like a palace after Mrs. Chen's basement. I paid cash, no mortgage, no monthly payments. For the first time in my adult life, I owned something outright that no one could take away from me. I furnished it simply: a comfortable couch, a real bed with a good mattress, a dining table where I could eat meals like a human being instead of hunched over a small desk in a basement room. I bought a television, not a huge one, just something to fill the quiet evenings. Most importantly, I had a kitchen where I could cook real meals instead of living on convenience store sandwiches and instant noodles. The luxury wasn't in expensive things. It was in dignity, in privacy, in the ability to take a shower without worrying about whether the bathroom was clean or available, in having a refrigerator where I could keep fresh food, in sleeping in a bed instead of on a mattress that smelled like other people's desperation. I invested most of the money conservatively: government bonds, blue-chip stocks, certificates of deposit. Nothing risky or complicated. I set up the accounts so that even if I lived extravagantly, I could never spend the principal. The interest alone would give me more income than I had ever earned working. But I didn't live extravagantly. I bought clothes that fit properly and didn't have holes in them, but nothing designer or flashy. I bought a newer car, a reliable Honda sedan, nothing that would draw attention. I ate well, but I cooked most meals at home. The biggest indulgence I allowed myself was good coffee and fresh fruit whenever I wanted it. What I discovered in those first months of my new life was something I hadn't expected: peace. For the first time since Rachel's mother died 23 years earlier, I wasn't worried about someone else's needs and wants. I wasn't working overtime to pay for Rachel's college, or her car, or her emergency expenses. I wasn't lying awake at night worrying about whether I could afford her wedding or help her buy a house. I wasn't sacrificing my own comfort and security for someone who saw me as an inconvenience. I was just living my own life, and it was surprisingly pleasant. I started volunteering at a local food bank, something I had never had time for when I was working double shifts to support Rachel. The work was simple: sorting donations, packing meals for families in need, but it felt meaningful in a way my warehouse security job never had. The other volunteers were mostly retirees like me, people with time and energy to give back. I made friends slowly, carefully. I didn't tell anyone about the lottery money. I just said I had retired early and moved to the neighborhood for a fresh start. It wasn't entirely a lie. There was Martha, a widow in her 70s, who had been volunteering at the food bank for 15 years. She had a sharp wit and didn't suffer fools, but she was kind to people who genuinely needed help. She reminded me a little of Rachel's mother, the same no-nonsense attitude combined with deep compassion. There was Frank, a retired mechanic who fixed the food bank's delivery truck for free and taught me how to change my own oil. He had been estranged from his son for 10 years over some argument neither of them could remember anymore, and sometimes we would sit in comfortable silence, two men who understood loss. There was Elena, a former teacher who organized reading programs for the children who came to the food bank with their parents. She was younger than me, maybe 55, and had never married. She said she had been too busy raising other people's children to think about having her own. These people became my friends not because of what I could give them, but because of who I was. They didn't know about my money, my former life, or my daughter who had thrown me away. They just knew Benjamin, the quiet man who showed up every Tuesday and Thursday to help sort groceries and never complained about the work. For the first time in decades, I had relationships that weren't based on obligation or need. Nobody wanted anything from me except my company and my help with the work we were all there to do. I started taking evening walks around my neighborhood, something I had never had time for in my old life. The streets were lined with modest houses like mine, with small gardens and children playing in front yards. I would wave to neighbors working in their gardens or walking their dogs. Some of them started to recognize me and would stop to chat about the weather or local news. It was ordinary, this new life of mine. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. Sundays were my favorite day. I would sleep in, a luxury I had never allowed myself when I was working to support Rachel, then make a good breakfast and read the newspaper cover to cover. In the afternoon, I might work in my small garden or watch a baseball game on television. In the evening, I would cook a nice dinner and enjoy it at my dining table while watching the sunset through my kitchen window. There was no drama, no crisis, no one demanding my time or money or emotional energy, just quiet contentment. 6 months after winning the lottery, I realized something that both surprised and saddened me. I was happier than I had been in years, maybe decades. The sadness came from recognizing how much of my previous happiness had been tied to Rachel's approval and affection. I had convinced myself that I was living for love, but really I had been living for the hope of love that never came consistently. I had been an emotional hostage, grateful for whatever scraps of attention she gave me between the time she ignored me or took me for granted. Now, in my quiet house with my simple routine and my genuine friendships, I understood what actual peace felt like. It felt like not checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a message that never came. It felt like making plans based on what I wanted to do instead of what someone else needed from me. It felt like going to bed at night without that knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if I had done enough, given enough, sacrificed enough to earn love. I had enough money to last several lifetimes, but more importantly, I had finally learned to value myself enough to build a life worth living. That's when Rachel called. It was a Thursday evening in March, almost exactly 1 year since Rachel had thrown me out. I was in my kitchen, making dinner and listening to jazz on the radio when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I was expecting a call from Frank about weekend plans to help him fix his neighbor's fence. But something made me glance at the caller ID. Rachel. I stared at her name on the screen, my hand frozen halfway to the phone. For 11 months, I had heard nothing from her. No birthday call, no Christmas greeting, no response to the letter I had finally sent her months earlier, letting her know I was safe and had found a place to live. Complete silence. Now she was calling. My first instinct was to answer immediately, to hear her voice again, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of that $10 bill, or the way she had turned away from me in the coffee shop, or simply the hard-won peace I had found in my new life. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, after I had finished my dinner and cleaned the dishes, I played the message. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost tentative. "It's me, Rachel. I know it's been a while since we talked, and I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss you, Dad. I really do. Derek and I broke up a few months ago, and I've been doing some soul-searching, you know? I realize I made some mistakes, and I'd love a chance to talk to you about everything. Maybe we could meet for coffee or something? I'm at a different number now, so call me back when you get this. I love you, Dad. I hope you're doing okay." I played the message 3 times, listening carefully to every word, every pause, every inflection in her voice. Something about it felt rehearsed, like she had practiced what she was going to say. The timing seemed suspicious, too. Derek was gone, and suddenly she missed her father. But she was my daughter. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the abandonment, part of me wanted to believe that she had genuinely realized her mistakes and wanted to rebuild our relationship. I didn't call her back that night. Instead, I sat on my front porch swing and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Over the next 3 days, she called twice more. Each message was similar, apologetic, loving, asking for a chance to make things right. She never mentioned money or asked about my living situation, which I found interesting. If she had heard about the lottery win, surely that would have colored her messages somehow. On Sunday, I finally called her back. "Dad!" She sounded genuinely happy to hear from me, though there was something else in her voice I couldn't quite identify. "Thank you for calling me back. I wasn't sure if you would." "Hello, Rachel." I kept my voice neutral, friendly but cautious. "How are you doing? Are you okay? I've been so worried about you." Worried. She had been worried about me for 11 months, but had never once tried to contact me until now. "I'm doing well," I said. "I have a small house now, a quiet neighborhood. I'm keeping busy." "That's good. That's really good to hear." There was a pause. "Dad, I know I have a lot to apologize for. The way things ended between us, it wasn't right. I was in a bad place and I made some terrible decisions. I hurt you, and I'm so sorry." The words sounded sincere, but I found myself analyzing them like a security guard checking credentials. She was sorry for hurting me, but not specifically for what she had done. Bad place, terrible decisions, vague language that didn't acknowledge the calculated cruelty of throwing me out for her dog. "I appreciate you saying that, Rachel. I was wondering, would you like to meet for lunch or dinner? Somewhere we could talk properly? I know there's a lot we need to work through, but I'd really like to try." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to rush back into her life and pretend the past year had never happened, but I had learned to value my peace, and I wasn't sure I was ready to risk it. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I miss you, Dad. I miss having you in my life." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to sort through my feelings. The daughter I had raised, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares, was asking for another chance. Shouldn't I give it to her? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about her timing and her approach. The next week, she called twice more. Each conversation was pleasant, warm even. She asked about my health, my living situation, whether I was working. I answered her questions honestly but didn't volunteer much information. I had a house, I was retired, I was doing fine. Retired? She had asked when I mentioned it. But, Dad, you're only 61. How can you afford to retire? There it was, the question I had been waiting for. I'm managing, I said simply. Well, I'm happy for you. You deserve some peace after working so hard for so many years. Working so hard to support her, though she didn't say that part. During our third conversation, she mentioned that she was looking for a new apartment. The rent on her current place was too expensive, and with Derek gone, she was struggling to make ends meet. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Yeah, it's been tough. I'm working 2 jobs now just to keep my head above water. But I'm managing. I keep thinking about how much easier things were when we were a family, when we had each other. When she had someone to pay for everything, I thought, but didn't say. Life changes, I said instead. It does, but sometimes change can be good, right? Sometimes we get second chances to make things better. The conversation continued in that vein, with her dropping hints about her financial struggles and her desire to rebuild our relationship. She never asked for money directly, but the subtext was clear. After that call, I decided to do something I probably should have done earlier. I hired a private investigator. It seemed extreme, but I needed to know the truth about Rachel's situation before I made any decisions about our relationship. I had $43 million now, and I needed to understand whether her sudden desire for reconciliation was genuine or financially motivated. The investigator's report arrived a week later, and it told me everything I needed to know. Rachel and Derek had indeed broken up, but not recently. They had separated 8 months ago, shortly after selling my old house. The reason for the breakup was Derek's discovery that Rachel had been having an affair with her married boss at the marketing firm. She had been fired from that job 6 months ago for continuing the affair after Derek confronted them. She was currently working as a waitress at a chain restaurant and living in a studio apartment across town. Her rent was 3 months behind, and she was facing eviction. But the most interesting detail was this. 2 weeks before her first call to me, Rachel had been seen at a gas station asking the clerk about lottery winners in the area. She had specifically asked about the man who had won $79 million the previous year. She knew. Somehow she had found out about my lottery win, and that's when she had suddenly been overcome with love and regret for the father she had thrown away. I sat in my kitchen reading the investigator's report and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but a kind of cold clarity. My daughter wasn't calling because she missed me or because she had realized her mistakes. She was calling because she needed money, and she had discovered that her discarded father was now worth more than she had ever imagined. The timing, the carefully crafted messages, the gradual hints about her financial problems, it had all been planned. She was running a con on her own father, and she thought I was still the same desperate, lonely man who would do anything for her approval. She had no idea that I had changed, that I had found something worth more than her love, my own self-respect. My phone rang again that evening. Rachel, right on schedule. Hi, Dad, I was thinking maybe we could meet this weekend. I found this nice little restaurant downtown, nothing fancy, just a place where we could talk. Actually, Rachel, I said, my voice calm and steady, I think it would be better if you came here, to my house. There are some things we need to discuss. There was a brief pause. Oh, okay, sure. That sounds good. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, I said. We have a lot to talk about. After I hung up, I sat on my front porch swing and watched the sunset. Tomorrow, my daughter would come to my home for the first time since she had thrown me out. But this time, I would be in control of the conversation. This time, I would be the one with all the cards. Rachel arrived at exactly 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, just as we had arranged. I watched from my kitchen window as she pulled up in a car I didn't recognize, an older model sedan that had seen better days. She sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before getting out, probably rehearsing whatever performance she had planned for our reunion. When she walked up to my front door, I could see she had dressed carefully for the occasion. Nothing too fancy, but put together in a way that suggested she was doing well for herself. Her hair was styled, her makeup was subtle but professional. She was playing the part of the successful daughter who had simply made a mistake, not the desperate woman facing eviction. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hello, Rachel." "Dad." She smiled, and for a moment I almost forgot everything I had learned about her recent circumstances. She looked so much like her mother when she smiled like that. "Thank you for inviting me over. Come in." She stepped into my small foyer and looked around with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "Dad, this is lovely, really nice." "Thank you. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "That would be wonderful." I led her to my kitchen, and she continued to look around with what seemed like appreciation. "You've done really well for yourself. This is such a cozy home." Cozy. A polite way of saying smaller and more modest than she had expected. I poured 2 cups of coffee and we sat at my small dining table. For a few minutes, we made small talk about the neighborhood, the weather, inconsequential things. She complimented my coffee, asked about my garden, mentioned how peaceful the area seemed. Finally, she took a deep breath and began what I now recognized as her prepared speech. "Dad, I owe you a huge apology. I've had almost a year to think about what happened between us, and I know I was wrong. I was selfish and thoughtless, and I hurt you terribly. I'm ashamed of how I treated you." I nodded, but said nothing. "Derek and I broke up," she continued. "Actually, that whole relationship was a mistake from the beginning. He was controlling and manipulative, and he influenced a lot of my bad decisions, including what happened with you." Interesting. Now, Derek was the villain and she was just his victim. "I'm sorry to hear about your breakup," I said. "It's for the best. It's given me time to reflect on what's really important. Family is important, Dad. You're important. I realize now that I took you for granted for years, and when I finally pushed you away completely, I lost the most important person in my life." Her voice was getting emotional now, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. If I hadn't read the investigator's report, I might have been moved by her performance. "I miss you," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I miss having my dad in my life. I miss our talks, our dinners together, just knowing that you were there. This past year has been the loneliest year of my life." "Has it?" I asked quietly. "Yes, absolutely. I keep thinking about all the things I want to tell you, all the ways I want to make this right. I know I have a lot to make up for, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." She paused, wiping away a tear that may or may not have been genuine. I was hoping maybe I could move back home with you. I know this house is smaller than our old place, but I don't need much space. I just want to be near you again. I want us to be a family." There it was. She wanted to move in with me. "Tell me about your current living situation," I said. She hesitated for just a moment. "Well, I have an apartment across town. It's fine, but it's temporary. The lease is up soon, and I've been thinking about what I want to do next. Being here with you feels right, Dad. It feels like coming home." "And your job?" Another brief pause. "I'm between jobs right now, actually. I left my position at the marketing firm a few months ago. There were some ethical issues with the management there, and I couldn't be part of it anymore. I'm looking for something new, something that aligns better with my values." Every word was a lie or a distortion of the truth. She hadn't left her job. She had been fired for having an affair with her married boss. She wasn't between leases. She was facing eviction. And her sudden desire to live with me had nothing to do with missing family dinners, and everything to do with needing a place to stay and access to money. "Rachel," I said gently, "how did you find me?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how did you get my phone number? How did you know where I lived? We haven't spoken in almost a year." "Oh." She looked uncomfortable for the first time since arriving. I hired someone to help me find you, a private investigator. I know that sounds extreme, but I was desperate to contact you and I didn't know how else to do it." "That must have been expensive." "It was worth it. You're my father. I would have spent anything to find you." I took a sip of my coffee and set the cup down carefully. "Rachel, do you know what I do for work now? You said you were retired. Do you know how I can afford to be retired at 61? She shook her head, but something flickered in her eyes. "I won the lottery, Rachel. $79 million. After taxes, about $43 million. The mask slipped. For just a moment, I saw her real reaction, not surprise, but relief. Relief that we could finally stop playing games. But she recovered quickly. Dad, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you. You deserve every penny after everything you've been through. Do I? Of course you do. You worked so hard for so many years, and now you can finally enjoy life. The question is, I said, watching her face carefully, when did you find out about the lottery win? What do you mean? I mean, when did you learn that I had won? Before you started calling me, or after? She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to continue lying or admit the truth. Does it matter? She finally asked. It's the only thing that matters. We sat in silence for several minutes. Rachel stared into her coffee cup, and I watched her face as the reality of the situation settled in. She had been caught, and we both knew it. I found out about 3 weeks before I called you, she said quietly. How? Someone at the restaurant where I work mentioned seeing your picture in an old newspaper article about lottery winners. She said you looked familiar, and when she described you, I knew it was you. And that's when you decided you missed me. Dad, it's not like that. What is it like, Rachel? I was already thinking about reaching out to you. Finding out about the lottery it gave me the courage to actually do it. The courage, or the motivation. She looked up at me then, and I saw something I had never seen in my daughter's eyes before. Genuine fear. Not of losing money, but of losing her last chance at having a safety net. I need help, Dad, she said, abandoning all pretense. I'm in trouble. I lost my job. I'm behind on rent. I'm probably going to be evicted next week. Derek left me with nothing, and I don't have anywhere else to turn. What about your friends, your co-workers? What about Derek's family, who you seem so close to? They won't help me. Nobody wants to get involved. But you thought I would. You're my father. Oh, I was your father a year ago when you threw me out of my own home for a dog. She winced. I know I was wrong. But Dad, I'm desperate. I don't have anyone else. You had me, Rachel. You had someone who would have done anything for you, who sacrificed everything for you, who loved you more than his own life, and you threw me away like garbage. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice. You chose Derek and his dog over your father, who had spent 28 years putting you first in everything. You chose to kick me out with $10 and not think about me again until you needed something. Tears were flowing freely now, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic. What do you want me to say? She asked. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. I was wrong and I hurt you, and I would do anything to take it back. Anything? Yes. Joe, would you give up the money? She looked confused. What money? If I had never won the lottery, if I was still living in a basement room working as a night security guard, would you still be here asking for another chance? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. That's what I thought. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I had placed the investigator's report. I brought it back to the table and set it in front of her. I know about Derek. I know about your boss. I know about your job, your apartment, your debts. I know you were asking about lottery winners before you called me. I know everything, Rachel. She stared at the report without opening it. Dad, I can explain. There's nothing to explain. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I finally believe you. I sat back down and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. She was 29 years old, beautiful, intelligent, capable of taking care of herself if she chose to, but she had learned that it was easier to use people than to be independent, easier to manipulate than to work for what she wanted. You want to know what the worst part is? I said. It's not that you only came back for the money. I expected that. The worst part is that you thought I was still the same desperate, lonely man who would be grateful for whatever scraps of affection you threw my way. Dad, you thought you could walk back into my life, perform some regret and affection, and I would hand over my house, my money, my newfound peace, just to have you back. You thought I was still that pathetic father who would accept any treatment as long as it meant I wasn't alone. That's not. But here's what you don't understand, Rachel. This past year, the year you abandoned me completely, has been the happiest year I've had in decades. I have friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have a home that no one can take away from me. I have peace, real peace, For the first time since your mother died. I reached across the table and took her hand, not in affection, but to make sure she was listening. You taught me a valuable lesson when you threw me out. You taught me that I don't need your love to be happy. I don't need your approval to have worth. I don't need you in my life to feel complete. I let go of her hand and leaned back in my chair. So here's my answer to your request to move back home. No. Dad, please. No, Rachel. You made your choice a year ago. You chose Derek and his dog over your father. You chose money and convenience over love and loyalty. You chose to see me as disposable when I became inconvenient. I was wrong. Yes, you were. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. She was sobbing now, ugly, desperate tears that seemed genuine for the first time since she had arrived. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Rachel. Figure it out. You're an intelligent, capable adult. Find a job, find an apartment you can afford, build a life for yourself, do what millions of other people do every day. I could lose everything. You already lost everything that mattered. You lost it the day you decided your father's love wasn't worth having. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. I think it's time for you to leave. She sat at my table for another minute, staring at the investigator's report, then slowly got up and walked to the door. Dad, I know you hate me right now, but please don't close the door completely. Maybe someday. Someday what? Someday you'll love me for who I am instead of what I can give you. Someday you'll value me as a person instead of an ATM? She had no answer for that. Goodbye, Rachel. She walked to her car without looking back. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and sat back down at my kitchen table. I felt many things in that moment. Sadness, disappointment, even a touch of guilt. But mostly, I felt something I had never experienced before in my relationship with my daughter. Complete and utter peace. My phone would ring again over the next few weeks. Rachel would try anger, then bargaining, then more manipulation. But I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. Some people don't deserve a place in your world, even if they share your DNA. I had raised my daughter to be strong and independent. Now it was time for her to prove she had learned those lessons, even if she had to learn them the hard way. As for me, I had everything I needed, a comfortable home, genuine friends, and the knowledge that I was finally free from the burden of loving someone who saw that love as weakness to be exploited. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly, completely happy, and that was worth more than all the lottery money in the world.